Hi, my name is Reid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. And today I'd like to talk about why you can fight against narcissistic abuse yet still feel bad. Well, before I get into today's video, I did just want to announce that I'll be starting 2 online support groups for survivors of narcissistic abuse. And the purpose of these 2 groups is to create a sense of safety and support for survivors where the goal is to really have the experience of having your experience in what you went through understood, and to have the beliefs that may have had to have been adopted along the way countered in the connections forged and support experienced from the group. Also to kind of promote each member's pursuits of their goals in life outside a group through knowing the kind of support that one gets to have by folks who get what it's like to go through this type of experience, and who are very much championing one another in their efforts to progress in their recovery. So they'll be 75 minutes long, and I'll be holding 2, there'll be 5 members each. And the cost of the groups is $150 per session. There's a link below on the description box for a page on my site that offers more information if you're interested. Okay, with that being said, today I want to focus on an idea that really came from a comment on last week's video. First of all, everyone's comments have been just so much appreciated and very, very, I think, insightful and perceptive, and often, I think, courageous in expressing your own experience in going through this type of abuse. But the one I want to focus on today, and also plan to get to other comments in future videos, is one written by Jen Niebla Love, and the comment is this, in relation to last week's video about simply that the only thing to do in narcissistic abuse is to survive it. So here goes. I get confused by this paradigm because I most certainly did not submit to my scapegoat role, and I remember having a very clear understanding that I was being mistreated. I started fighting back young, around 6 or 7, and it gradually increased until puberty, when I became completely belligerent toward both parents. Despite this, the message that I was defective and broken still made it to my core, and I don't understand how that happened. I feel like I failed myself. I feel like if I had been more humble, then the abuse would have affected me less. I guess it proves how we criticize ourselves no matter what path we chose. The fact that no one ever mentions victims fighting back also makes me worried that something is wrong with me. Well, I very much appreciate this comment, and a lot of folks replied to Jen's comment too, and it I think highlights something important that does it count in essence as narcissistic abuse if one fights back? And I think there are very good reasons why it absolutely does. And I think in my videos to date, I have not emphasized this way of coping with the abuse, where one can still emerge feeling like Jen describes, of harboring this belief of, say, being defective, and undeserving, despite really fighting back when the abuse was happening. In today's videos, I'd like to offer some explanation as to how a child has very little choice but to absorb the family's attitude towards him or her in the service of finding a way to share a reality with the family. And then once that shared reality is in place, then the overt ways of responding may be chosen in a tactical way because they afford the best shot at survival while taking on the least amount of damage. But that's also to say that by virtue of having to share a reality with a narcissistic parent and the system that reflects, the survivor incurs a cost, and that cost can include having the kind of feelings of defectiveness, or as Jen put it, feeling even broken at times. Anyway, we'll get to that, and also highlight how that was still adaptive in surviving what needed to be survived. So I think there are 3 contributions to an explanation as to why one may have chosen the tactic of fighting back, yet still experience sort of beliefs about themselves that accuse them of being defective, undeserving, and the like. And as I alluded to just a second ago, the first is our inborn need to share a reality with our parents. As I've mentioned in other videos, we come into this world as fairly helpless beings who are dependent on our parents to be fed, clothed, changed, diapers, and in a psychological sense, known. And part of being and feeling known is finding oneself in the mind of the parent. And when a parent is well adjusted enough and can see and appreciate and respond to the child on the child's own terms and as a separate being, then the child gets to share a reality or marked by that child having room enough to both be themselves while feeling known and sharing the same reality as the parent. That is, they don't have to compromise themselves to occupy that shared reality. And I don't mean in an absolute sense. Certainly there are going to be times that are, we feel frustrated with a parent or there's a misattunement. But this is more about the preponderance of the kid's experience and relationship to the parent, often dictated by the relative health of the parent's own psychology. So when a parent is narcissistic, though, they're going to have grave difficulty seeing the child as a separate person, but instead may see the kid as an extension of the narcissist's own self, who must reflect back that parent's own inflated sense of importance or being special. Otherwise, that narcissistic parent could come into contact with his or her own sense of worthlessness that needs to be continually found outside of themselves. Oftentimes, it's going to be found in the scapegoated child victim who's born into the narcissistic family. So for the child to share reality with a narcissistic parent, they have to accommodate themselves to the narcissist's definition of reality, and that's going to be likely constricting and very ill-fitting for the child. And this arrangement can leave the child feeling like the only time they have and deserve contact with others is when they are being how the other wants them to be. Almost that there is no contact when they are in touch with and being themselves, the child. Contact only occurs when they are fully ministering to the narcissistic parent. And this is exactly what must be done for the child to survive. In a psychological sense, we can't live without a shared sense of reality with our parent at that age. So I think that's an important backdrop to what may occur before the child victim of narcissistic abuse starts to overtly fight against how they're being mistreated by the parents. If one of the conditions of sharing a reality with a narcissistic parent is being the one that the narcissist finds his or her own worthlessness in, then it can very much find a foothold in the child's self, even if and when the child protests. In the type of way that Jen described in her comment. And these footholds often come in the form of the kinds of beliefs discussed in these other videos and that Jen alluded to of I am defective, I am undeserving. And these beliefs may even be held unconsciously to serve the purpose, again, of sharing that reality with the narcissistic parent. As I mentioned before, we strive to have a good relationship. If that's not available, a bad relationship, and at all costs, we need to avoid no relationship. And so adopting these beliefs about ourselves preserve the bad relationship, because that's all that's really available, unfortunately, for the kid in this situation. Again, having to share reality with a parent like this, I think can very much kind of like entrench these feelings in the child, and though they may fight it, the sense that, no, this is a truth about who I am in relation to the parent can still sort of be experienced and kind of lived by the child victim. The second contributor to this is something I described in another video that was titled, Why Do I Believe What the Narcissistic Parent Tells Me? And in that video, I discussed this process known as pathological projective identification, whereby the narcissistic parent cannot tolerate their own sense of worthlessness and unconsciously finds it in the scapegoated child, then acts in ways to kind of coercively influence that child to identify with those cast-off feelings of worthlessness. It can be a very subtle maneuver where, in relation to the narcissist, the child finds themselves seemingly thinking their own thoughts that they are not good enough, that they are inadequate, defective, when in fact it's a way of complying with what is the narcissistic parent claims is necessary to share a reality with them. So in this way, the narcissistic parent is actively working to engage in an effort to induce these feelings, these sort of bad feelings, the feelings of defectiveness and so forth, and using the child's need to share reality with that narcissistic parent kind of as leverage, because the dilemma faced by the child is either you believe what I need you to believe about yourself so I don't have to feel it, or you don't get to share a reality with me. And again, that's like a psychological death for the child. So there's really no choice involved for that child. And again, once these feelings by the child get identified with, then their overt protest against how the parent's treating them can still leave behind the residue of these feelings of worthlessness that were in fact projected into them and influenced to be identified with by the narcissistic parent. This again is a largely thought to be unconscious process. The kid, on a lot of counts, like they're dependent on the parent, they need to share reality with the parent, and their cognitive faculties are in development. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that a therapist is trained to deal with. And so there's really, it's sort of too much, too sort of chaotic for a kid to be able to make sense of when it's happening. So it's there's sort of like, I think, a gravitational pull to identify with what's being thrust upon them as a condition for sharing that reality. And again, this sort of the fighting against can happen sort of on the top of this, but the feelings can really be there and persist beyond the abuse into adulthood. And the third contributor to why this can happen is if the narcissistic parent engaged in the practice of goading. And Webster's defines goading as to provoke or annoy someone so as to stimulate some action or reaction. And what can happen in a narcissistic family is that the scapegoated victim will be sort of provoked by the narcissistic parent in ways that are just infuriating to that child or adolescent. And then the narcissistic parent can use the child's angry reaction as an excuse to pathologize, get even more angry with the child. And so in a way, it's terrible, I think, because the kid's getting manipulated into having this big reaction and then punished. It's sort of like playing into the hands of the narcissistic parent in this way, but that's all that there really is to do for the child. And it can really leave the victim of this, still having that sense that there's something wrong with me. And again, it's just this very systematic, targeted campaign of by the narcissistic parent of needing the child to feel what they cannot bear. But the goading tactic can very much play into that. Oftentimes, there's a feeling that one is leaving unsaid what would really undo the parent. Even when there's a lot of this, fighting and overt protest against how one is being treated, I think narcissistic people, when they are untreated in this way, remain quite dangerous. And, I think that even when there's the protest or the fighting, this is anecdotal and sort of just from my own perspective here, but there can be this sense of needing to stop short of doing the thing that would really lay bare entirely the narcissistic parent's pathology. And I know that's maybe a little vague, but it may be something that resonates with those who've survived and even coped by fighting back. This sense of you really can't go for the jugular because either it would totally undo everything, or the retaliation would very much be unsurvivable. I wanted to address this very important point, and again, thank Jen for posting it. And I think similar to last week's video, the main takeaway, at least as I think about it, to these points, is how much the deck was stacked against the scapegoated survivor of narcissistic abuse, even when and if they fought back. And I think that really reinforces that in this situation, however it was done, the only thing that there was and is to do is survive it. And one of the reasons that childhood narcissistic abuse can be so painful is the child's need to share reality with the parent, no matter how much that child has to suffer in order to do so. And I like to think of recovery from this form of abuse as taking gradual and deliberate steps towards knowing that one no longer needs to share reality with their narcissistic abuser, and they can survive that. And that at the end of doing so, of this process, there's a lot to be gained in the form of a shared reality one gets to have with oneself and the selected people that one chooses to get close to. Well, thank you for your continued support of this channel and these videos, and I look forward to posting more videos every Sunday at 9 a.m. PST, and to addressing other comments that folks have left too. So take care, and thanks.